Hey guys, so welcome to your very first class. This is the class that I recommend nail technicians start with simply because it has a lot of really valuable information, especially if you're a beginner. So with that being said, let's move right along. Okay, so let's get started on the fact on why washing your hands is so important. I can't stress this enough. It is probably the most important thing you're ever going to do as a professional. The reason you want to make sure that your clients are washing their hands prior to every service is because a lot of them are not telling you that they're wearing oils, lotions, or moisturizers prior to their service. All of those things that I listed typically have oil as a base in them. And as we already know, and if you don't know, oil is the enemy of acrylics or any nail enhancements for that matter. Now, although you can actually use whichever soap preferences you have, I have a personal recommendation. Now, this may seem a little bit unorthodox to some people, but I prefer using dish soap simply because it is designed to remove oils. There is a downside though. It draws out so much oils that sometimes it can leave your client's hands a little bit dry. So less is more. You want to make sure that you let them know not to use too much of that soap. Now this is a good example of how you want the hands and nails to come out. You don't want the hands to be super dehydrated because believe it or not, they can get so dry that they can crack during your service. Then you're liable for that. Again, I can't stress this enough. Less is more. But with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the very next thing, which is actually going to be your prep. The first thing that we're going to be doing in the prep process is using a cuticle pusher. Check this out. So I know that this cuticle pusher looks a little bit weird, and you're right, it does. Normally these things are metallic. These are actually silicone tip cuticle pushers. They're cheap. You can find them right on Amazon, and they don't cause like as much pain as the metallic cuticle pushers normally do. I know from my experience, customers have typically complained about discomfort. I wouldn't say like actual pain, but discomfort. And if you can find anything that's going to make your client's experience a little bit better, I recommend it. These are not reusable, obviously. They're a one time use. At least I recommend them as a one time use. So this is an option. I prefer these, but these are totally up to you. So now after you push these cuticles back, we're going to talk about a drill bit that I absolutely love and adore, and I recommend that all of you get yourself one. It is a ball point diamond bit. You can also get this on Amazon. Now, I don't remember the exact price of this. I want to say that maybe it was like $4 or $5. However, this is a lifesaver. So, a lot of people are always asking how do they make the cuticles look so good and so clean? This is a go to. It will clean up the cuticles so well and is not abrasive and doesn't hurt the client at all. And even better, it's beginner friendly. I give this a 10 out of 10. The reason I say 10 out of 10, it's impossible to hurt the client. Well, I'm not going to say impossible because you could probably always figure out another way to hurt them, but it's super unlikely. Now, the reason I say that it's unlikely is because even though it's tough, it's still soft, meaning that you can press up against the skin, you can press against the nail, and it doesn't cause any damage, unlike a lot of other drill bits that would literally rip your client's fingers to shreds. And believe it or not, a lot of nail technicians have done that, and that's something we're going to try to avoid. Let me also not forget that it's super easy to use. Look at the cuticles. I mean, what is seen is just so obvious. I'm like literally passing over everything. No damage. It's lifting what it needs to lift and it's getting rid of what it needs to get rid of. Once you've done all that, you're going to go ahead and dust this off. By the way, this brush here, Amazon as well, super cheap. Also give this a 10 out of 10. It gets everything off that you need it to get off, but it's still super soft and again, super comfortable for your clients. So getting back to the drill bit, let's talk a little bit about what it actually did. If you look at the pointer finger and the middle finger here, you'll notice that it removed all of the cuticle area. However, it lifted up the dry skin. Now, the fact that it was lifted up is going to make it so much easier for us to remove it. By the way, I do want to remind you guys, you want to check the rules and regulations of the region where you live. Some places allow you to use cuticle cutters, some places don't. So again, this is 100% up to where you live and where you're from. I personally believe that the Russian manicure is a little bit excessive, so I don't do that. But what I do do is I use a cuticle pusher and I hold it flat up against the callus skin, and I'm only removing the portion that's actually sticking up. Now, again, like if you remember a few seconds ago, the reason that this is sticking up is because the ballpoint drill bit, it lifted it up. So all of this is callus skin. And using the cuticle cutter flat on top and not angle allows me to get just that skin, leaving all of the live flesh intact and not causing any harm to the client. Now, I don't recommend doing anything any more aggressive. This is as simple as it's going to get the result that most nail technicians are looking for, and it's that really clean cuticle area. You can achieve that look without causing a lot of harm to your client or any harm for that matter. I don't personally recommend the popular Russian style manicure that you guys are seeing online just because it's really risky. And it's something that should only be attempted by professionals who have specific training in that field and definitely have insurance, because there's a big possibility that you can, do something wrong and you end up with a lawsuit. So, me as an instructor, I'm always telling people keep it simple because simple is safe. The last thing you want to do in the beginning of your career is end up getting a lawsuit. So, avoid anything that's going to be too abrasive and too aggressive. This is simple, guys. This is really simple, and it's going to give you that clean look that you're looking for. As you can see, the nail plate is already starting to look really clean. So we're going to come in with another drill bit. Most of you guys are going to recognize this. It's a basic sanding band. Before you even think it, matter of fact, don't even think it. This is not a used sanding band. It just looks like that. Now, the reason that it looks like that is because it's worn out, brand new out of the box. They already come distressed like this. Now, it's a super soft sanding band, like probably the softest one you're ever going to find. I do not recommend using anything too aggressive on the client's natural nail plate. That's a no-no. You're probably thinking that I'm going to use this to prep the nail plate, and a lot of people typically do think that, and they actually do use it that way. However, I'm actually just going to use this to clean up the cuticle area slightly more. Now, the reason that I say that is because the first two steps that we were just talking about, it typically leaves a little bit of residue behind. This is going to get rid of all of that residue. So this is kind of like the cherry on top to your nail prep. At this point, you probably think that I sound insane, which totally makes sense because what I'm teaching you is literally not what anyone else is teaching you, but it's all going to make sense in the end. Now, you're probably wondering, if we're not going to use a sanding band to prep the actual plate and remove all of the shine, what are we going to use? I'm going to show you that right now. Before I actually tell you what I'm going to be using to remove the shine from this nail plate, let me use this moment to actually break down why you don't want to use a sanding band to remove all of the shine off of the nail plate. The primary reason is the fact that it's super abrasive. It's going to remove a lot of layers from the client's nail plate. That's going to thin out the nail, and that's a no-no for any professional. The second reason is that it's typical for clients to come back with ridges in their nail plate, either, from natural causes or from previous nail technicians. With the sanding band, because it's not flexible, you can't remove the shine from those grooves. You would then be forced to thin out the nail plate just to prep the nail, and that's something we don't want to do. So instead, we're going to use a completely different tool. I know you guys recognize this. It's an actual buffer. So the tool that I've been talking about this is just a regular buffer. A soft buffer at that, actually. Now, the reason that I recommend using a buffer to remove the shine, for two reasons. It's not abrasive, it's not going to take too many layers off of your client's nail plate, and it in fact will get into any grooves that your client has from either natural causes or from previous nail technicians. It will do the job. It will remove just enough shine for you to have a strong, long-lasting nail extension. I do want to add though, you can actually hurt your client with this. If you go a little bit too fast with the movements of the actual buffer, you can burn your client. So keep in mind, you want to be very patient. I also do want to add that these are only a one-time use. along with the actual sanding band. Sanding bands, files, and buffers are one-time use. I know typically a lot of them say washable, and technically you can wash anything, but washing something does not mean disinfected or sterilized. So make sure that wherever you're purchasing your files, buffers, or sanding bands, that they give you a good price. Typically when you buy these things in bulk, they're really cheap for you. So if you guys have any questions or concerns on where you can buy things in bulk, reach out to me via email and I'll try to find you a few links on where you can get the best prices. With that being said, let's go ahead and dust this off. We're going to pull out the handy dandy duster brush. Listen, guys, I told you at the beginning of the video of this duster brush, I got it on Amazon. You've got to try it. I absolutely love this duster brush. I think I only saw it in clear when I looked, but it's definitely a 10 out of 10. This step isn't 100% necessary, but I like to actually do it. Before I apply any extensions, I always like to file the edge of the nail. Just because when the client's nail is growing out, if you kind of leave them all jagged and rough to begin with, like when it starts to grow out, you're going to be able to see that underneath. I'm one of those nail technicians that feel like the underneath of the extensions actually matter. I know some nail technicians like to actually drill that off. So I think this all comes down to preference. It's not necessary, but it is necessary. It's something that I personally like to do, so I just decided to include it in here for you. Like I mentioned earlier with the buffers and the sanding band, this is also a one-time use file. You could honestly just give this, like the file and the buffer, to your customer and have them bring it back on their next visit. But I just, again, personally recommend buying these things in bulk to begin with, just so you don't have any problems. Because, believe it or not, you can actually cut somebody with this. That can also lead to a lawsuit. But we'll save that for another video and another class. And of course, this can get a little bit dusty, so we're just going to bring our duster back once again to get rid of all of that residue. Now this is controversial because it's actually not needed. Technically, you could skip over this entire part. However, I decided, let me actually talk about it and actually do this step, because whether you decide to do it or not to do it, it's totally up to you, but I'm still going to teach you, and that's what a good teacher does. So a lot of nail technicians like to use alcohol to remove any residue and kind of dry out the nail plate a little bit more. Me personally, I don't do this because there's nothing drier than dry, but it is a good step for people who do have a problem with preparation. The alcohol will dry out the nail plate even more. I personally just use a bottle of alcohol and some lint-free wipes. Also, Amazon, super affordable. If you guys need help finding these things, just go ahead and reach out to me via email and I'll try to find you a good deal. One thing I am going to skip though is going to be the dehydrator. It's completely unnecessary, and honestly a big portion of the time it turns out to be a scam. Dehydrator is like a little liquid, for those of you guys that don't know, that dries out the nail plate. Alcohol was already unnecessary to begin with, so anything extra that you do on top of that is completely unnecessary. So we're not even going to talk about dehydrator because it's literally not needed. The prep should have been enough. However, the alcohol should have been a double backup plan. You don't need a triple one. Dehydrator is something that I do not recommend to any nail technician. You want to remove the shine from these nails. You're not trying to kill them. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that officially concludes the nail preparation. Now the fun begins. So we're actually going to start applying the tips. You guys can use any tips that you guys want. I'm just going to be using these 3XL tips. I'm not going to leave them that long, don't worry. Do not panic. I would not do that to you as a beginner nail technician, just because 3XL tips are a lot to deal with. I'm just going to use them to apply on the nail, and after that we're going to cut them. I am, however, going to size these tips. When it comes to sizing tips, one thing you want to keep in mind is that the tip should always fit from sidewall to sidewall. If you apply a tip and you see that there's still nail plate kind of on the sides, just poking out slightly, the tip is too small. Go up a size. There are going to be times that your customer is actually going to be an in-between size. If that ever happens, go with the next size up and just use a nail clipper and kind of just clip at the edges of the tip until it is more of a perfect fit for your customer. I do it all the time, honestly. Don't worry about if it happens. It happens to me quite often, even my own nails. But anyway, moving on, nail glue. Nail technicians, I cannot stress this enough. Do not put so much time and effort looking for a new nail glue because believe it or not, even nail glue from the dollar store works perfectly fine. And I know this because I shop there. Another thing that I do want to mention is that nail glue can actually cause lifting, so try not to use too much of it. The reason that nail glue actually causes lifting is because acrylic bonds to the nail plate and glue acts like a barrier. So if there's ever any glue residue left on the natural nail plate, you want to remove it with a buffer before you apply your primer. Always remember that. What I like to do is plop a little bit of glue on the nail plate, then use the edges of the actual tip just to go from sidewall to sidewall, and then I apply my tip. You can also apply the glue directly to the tip and just place the tip on the nail. However, I'm typically wearing gloves when I'm working with clients, and in the past, I've always had the issue of getting the glue stuck to the glove that way. So I personally just prefer to put the glue on the nail plate. However, that is your choice, and whichever one you choose is perfectly okay. Another thing that I wanted to add, if you apply too much nail glue, it's going to take too long to dry. Now, I've seen a lot of nail technicians struggling with this. A lot of times they're blaming the glue. It's not the glue's fault. The more glue that you apply to the nail plate, the longer it's going to take to dry. So always keep in mind that less is more. You just need enough to adhere the tip to the nail plate, nothing more. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that room temperature affects not only the way that glue dries, it also affects the way acrylic dries. So if it's too cold in the room, like 70, 69, you're going to have a hard time with this. It really slows down the drying again in both acrylic and nail glue. I personally like to keep the temperature when I'm doing nails anywhere between 73 to 76. But again, this is all preference, but I do want you to keep that in mind. Okay, so the next step here is going to be cutting these claws. As beautiful as these things are, I do not want to start you guys off with doing nails that are extremely long. So we're going to chop these things down to a decent medium to long length. Also, something I want to include, which is it has nothing to do with the actual cutting of the tips, it's actually measuring the nails against each other. A lot of nail technicians have a hard time determining the sizes between all of the fingers, and a lot of them think that it actually has to be cuticle to cuticle in order for them to actually get them all the same size, and that's wrong. The reason that that's wrong is because some people have longer nail plates on different fingers, including myself. I'm the perfect example. If you look closely between my ring finger and my middle finger, you're going to notice that my ring finger's nail plate goes back a lot further. And if you were to go based off of the actual cuticle to cuticle, you would end up with two different lengths. Instead, you want to go finger to finger, just like I'm doing this right now. If you go cuticle to cuticle, you're going to end up getting different sizes. So this is something that you always want to keep in mind. You want to go ahead and continue with that process for all 10 fingers. Once you've completed that step, the next thing that we're going to do is blend all of the tips. Now, if you look closely, you'll notice where the raised area on the tip and the natural nail meet. That is exactly where we're going to blend at. There's multiple ways to do this, primarily two ways. You can use the hand file or you can use the electric nail drill. Today I'm going to show you how to use the nail drill just because the hand file takes a little bit more time, and honestly you probably will end up hurting your client this way, especially if you're a beginner. Also, using the hand file you risk kind of breaking the tip just because of the friction. So let's stick today with the e-file. If you guys have any questions on blending, you can always email me. I don't know if I've already mentioned this before, but when you become a student with our online school, you guys have direct access to me. So in case you didn't know, the email that you're going to be getting is actually exclusive for students only. Anything that you see here, if you have any questions, any concerns, any doubts in your mind, you can always reach out to me. So if there's anything here that confuses you, I'm only one email away. Okay, now getting back to the blending. If you look really closely, you'll notice that I'm only applying light pressure to the raised area, and that's pretty much where the tip begins. So we're not putting any pressure on the natural nail. This is solely on the tip. Once that area starts to get a little bit more blended, you want to use a buffer. You can use a file for this, but it's not going to be really smooth. A buffer will kind of blend that area in super good and give you a really flat surface to work with. You want a flat surface later. Trust me, it'll all make sense. I'm pretty sure most of you guys have figured out already that you need a flat surface in order for your acrylic to kind of apply smoothly. But we'll catch up on that a little bit later. For right now, let's go ahead and finish the buffing because the next step is going to be an important one. You do not ever want to forget this next step because if you do, you're going to get lifting. So we're going to dust this off. Most of you have already guessed it. The next step is going to be your acrylic primer. Primer is what's going to help adhere your acrylic to the natural nail plate. You don't want to forget this, and I'm telling you honestly because I've forgotten it plenty of times and regretted it later. So lucky for me, the acrylic I use has a really good bond, but there are brands out there that don't have a good bond, so if you forget this step, your nails are literally going to pop off like press-ons. That is reputation damage. You do not want to be known as the nail technician who has lifting, so keep this in mind, use your primer, and make sure that it's a good primer. Okay, now primer only needs one coat. Honestly, putting 2 coats is excessive, it's unnecessary. 1 coat on the natural nail only, and you definitely do not need it on the tip. That's just wasteful. The only time you're going to need to actually prime or prep a tip is typically when you're doing builder gel nails. And that's when you want to prep the whole tip. But this class is particularly just acrylic, so only 1 coat, natural nail, that's it. A little tip when it comes to primer, do not apply acrylic on top of wet primer because it can start to actually burn your client's finger. If that happens, spray some alcohol, they should be good, but avoid using acrylic on wet primer. So the next step would be for you to apply some acrylic. However, we're going to take a second, just momentarily, to show the new people who haven't done nails before how to grab an actual pearl. Okay, so you're going to submerge your brush, then you're going to press your brush against the edge of the actual bowl. You're going to start moving your brush out slightly until you see that 50% of the brush is now empty. Now what that means is that the liquid from the back of the brush is going to reach the tip of the brush. You're then going to dip the brush into the acrylic. You're going to slide a little bit to the side and pick up a pearl. Also, please do not expect to get this right on the first try. It's literally not going to happen. You're going to need lots of practice. Now, once you've got the hang of it, the next step is to start applying acrylic. I actually do want to start mentioning something to you guys that a lot of nail technicians fail to realize. This part is really not as important as so many nail technicians make it seem. So many nail technicians have rules like you got to do it in 1 pearl, you got to do it in 2 pearls, you got to do it in 3 pearls. That's not what I'm going to tell you guys to do. Use as many pearls as you need to. The end result is what matters, not this. However, I typically like to use around 3 to 4 pearls, sometimes even 5, and that's okay. Get as many pearls as you need to. Do not pay any mind to anyone telling you otherwise. As long as you're getting a good end result, that is what matters. So as you can see here, I'm not really following any rules. I'm just applying my acrylic. One thing I do say that is important, whenever you do apply your acrylic, just make sure the top of the bead is a little more flush. That way when you add your second pearl on top of it, it's not lumpy and bumpy. That's really it, to be honest with you. So what I mean the top of the pearl is where you first laid the pearl. You want to start applying a little bit of pressure downwards. That way it kind of flushes itself out, and when you lay your next pearl has room to actually move. And again, I do want to add that it doesn't have to be perfect. Your end result is what's going to be more important. If you make a mistake, that is okay. It's not frowned upon, it's actually encouraged. Learning is part of the process, and that's why I'm here. I'm going to turn this nail to the side so you can actually see what I meant about kind of flushing the top of the pearl. Now, if you look at the top of where the acrylic is, you'll see it's kind of a little more flatter than the rest of the nail. The only reason that that's flatter or flush is simply because when we come in and apply our next pearl, it'll have an easier time flowing through. If you have this area here a little bit more chunky and bumpy, your next pearl is going to have a difficult time kind of free flowing over the current acrylic. But again, I do want to mention if you make a mistake, that is okay. It's not frowned upon, it's actually encouraged. Make these mistakes. You can fix any problem that you create later. This is a product that can literally be manipulated after it's dried. It can be filed, it can be buffed. Anything that you do here can be fixed. Do not focus on creating the perfect nail. Focus on learning. Focus on taking your time. I do want to add though, when you're starting, a smaller brush is probably better. Just because smaller brushes equal smaller mistakes, bigger brushes mean bigger mistakes. So again, you can make these mistakes, but having a smaller brush will kind of keep that on the smaller side. And by small, I mean like a size 10, a size 12, sometimes even a size 14, but definitely let's stay away from the size 20s and 22s. Just because that can turn out to be a massive mistake. And you can still fix the acrylic even if you do make a massive mistake, but I would prefer you make smaller mistakes. As you start learning how to manipulate the acrylic and as you start learning how to lay better foundation, then give yourself a little raise, as in getting yourself a better brush. You know, the harder work you do, the more you reward yourself. Me personally, me personally, I prefer to use a size 12. Now, I've been doing nails for a little over 11 years now. Size 12 is typically my go-to. However, I can use a larger brush whenever I feel like I need to, primarily whenever I'm working with back-to-back-to-back clients and I really don't want to take my time and I know that it's going to be a busy day, then I increase the size of my brush. That way I can just work a little faster. But if it was up to me, I personally would not be a fast working nail technician. I like taking my time. A size 12 works for me perfectly. But remember, what I say is not law. You can always change up your brush sizes as you see fit. And guys, I also want to mention that if you get acrylic in the cuticles, just take your brush and clean around the cuticle like I just did. It's honestly not a big deal. As long as it's wet, you can easily clean around it. And that's pretty much it for acrylic application. You just repeat this process on all 10 fingers. And this is what you're going to have once you're done. Yes, I know it looks lumpy, bumpy, unpolished, and unfinished, but we're not even done. So the very next step, we're going to start using our electric nail drill again, but this time with a whole different bit. Okay, so we're going to remove our sanding bit, and the bit that we're going to replace it with, pay attention, is a cylinder medium grit carbide bit. Honestly, you can just search on Amazon medium grit drill bit and this is going to pop right up. I believe it's around $7 to $12. The prices change throughout the year, so sometimes they even have sales on these things where you get like 2 or 3 of them in a bundle. Okay, now let's actually talk about the drill bit and the actual sides of it. So this portion here, this is the part that actually removes acrylic, okay? That part can hurt a client, so you want to make sure that the side never touches the skin. The top is flat and then it has an edge in between both. That specific edge is what you want to use where the acrylic ends and the skin begins. There's a little area right in between. Nail technicians call that the cuticle area. That's kind of like the area where there is no acrylic and no skin. They kind of just meet. So if you see right now, I'm using the edge right in between that area. Now, if you notice, the flat surface is what's on the skin and the teeth is what's on the acrylic. The edge is right in between that in between area. What this does is actually just refine the area so it looks nice. It's aesthetically pleasing. And sometimes it can kind of remove a little bit of acrylic you might have left there, but nothing super crazy. Now, you can also use the drill bit to kind of like etch at the sides and get you a nice flat surface. I don't recommend that you do this if you're a beginner, just because you're kind of getting super close to the skin there. I would say practice a little bit and then do this. But as you can see, it does leave a really good shape. This part I would definitely recommend even if you're a beginner. You're just using the body of the drill bit to clean underneath the acrylic and give that a really good refined look. This last part is optional. Personally, I do it because I feel like it squares out my nails really good. And it's just less work with the hand file, although I do love hand filing. And we're going to be doing a lot of hand filing today. But I just feel that it makes my life a little bit easier. So I just use the bit on its side to get me a super square looking nail. The next thing we're going to do is just dust this off and start using the hand file. Now, the hand file is one thing that I particularly love just because I feel like the drill bit really can't create too much volume and body. And I feel like the hand file kind of gives you a little bit more control. So me personally, I just use the hand file down the left edges and then down the right edges, just kind of to take it away from that boxy look and then come and finish it off with a buffer. Now pay attention if you like for your cuticles to look super elegant. One of the things that I do is use the actual edge of the buffer to get right in that in-between area that we were talking about earlier and just get in there really good because it'll give you a really deep depth look. If you've ever seen my work on social media, one thing about me, my cuticles always look amazing, and this is one of the secrets that I always keep to myself. Shh. And then after that, you just continue buffing the rest of the nails. And voila, you've got some beautifully buffed nails. I can't lie, this is where I start to kind of get excited because I can kind of see my work coming to life. Anyway, so we're at the point where we've got to add some cuticle oil. Don't be selfish with this. Throw it on there because you're going to want to moisturize not only the cuticles but the entire fingers. Primarily, you want to moisturize the fingers because when you go in and take your photos for social media, fingers kind of look better when they're moisturized because I guess people can be bullies online sometimes, and if clients have like dry looking hands, people will call you out. I remember one time specifically, I posted a picture of someone's nails and their hands weren't moisturized. And what I mean by moisturized, like I don't mean drenched, they just gotta look good, you know? They roasted her in the comment section. I literally had to delete the photo just to make sure that my client was not getting bullied online. So, anyway, moisturize because people are mean and you don't want to deal with cyber bullies, and it does make your photos look really good. Now, one thing I do want to mention, do not leave the oil on your client's fingers. We talked about oil causing lifting in the beginning of this class, so definitely apply what you need, rub it all in there, and then send your client to wash their hands again. I don't think I need to teach you how to wash your hands a second time because we did that at the beginning of the video as well. Remember? Well, in case you forgot, you're just going to use some Dawn dish soap. I recommend Dawn. I recommend Dawn. I've said it before because it removes oils. As you can see, bam. Look at this. Beautiful acrylic nails and no oil, and most importantly, they are moisturized. Now, technically, this is the end of the class, but I didn't want to stop and I wanted to show you some cool nail art stickers. I got these on Amazon, guys. These things are like $2. So you don't technically have to watch this portion of the video, but I recommend it because it's fun. Now, the reason I love using nail stickers is because one, they're super cheap, two, they're always available, and three, they look really good, okay? Actually, four, they're super easy to do. Did I mention that already? I don't remember. Anyway, try some stickers. These things are available all over the internet, okay? Have fun. There's no rules because if you mess up, you can always pull these things off and start all over again. Once you apply the stickers, you're going to want to put a gel top coat on them because they will literally pop off. You can do a matte top coat or a gel top coat. Today, I'm going to go with a gel top coat. Now you can use any gel top coat for this, but what I do recommend is getting something with a thicker viscosity. And what I mean by that is you don't want to end up using a gel top coat that's like really thin, and you have to end up doing like 5 or 6 coats just to cover the stickers. The stickers do raise slightly. Obviously, they're made of paper, so you want a gel top coat that's gonna cover that up without leaving it bumpy. That way, it feels like a flat surface. So you're going to do this to all 10 fingers and you're going to cure them in your UV light or LED light or both because sometimes they do come together for 2 to 3 minutes. I kind of like to do it for 4 minutes because sometimes I feel like I get unlucky with gel and I never really believe it's 100% dry just because it looks so wet. But technically 2 minutes should be fine. But if you're like me, 4 minutes. A quick tip. If you notice that the stickers kind of look like it's still poking out a little bit, just go ahead and add another coat. Gel self levels, so a second coat should make it look like a flat surface. You also want to stay away from 3D stickers. And this is the conclusion to our class, guys. I'm going to throw in some really cute accessories and bid you guys adieu. Take care, and I will see you guys for next class. Thanks for watching.